Hey, welcome back to another episode of A Warrior Spirit, where we enable the inner warrior to shine in their light. Today, the warrior I have, looking like a warrior, is Ken Noble. Ken is a friend of mine. We were together at the John Maxwell team. Actually, Ken owns Noble Leadership Solutions, coaching and speaking company. He's also an executive director at the John Maxwell team. And Ken, I appreciate you joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Ken, you're a little unique in the path that you've taken. You were a pastor, and now you're a business executive and business leader. What brought you to being a pastor? And then what took you to being a business leader?
Well, I wasn't always a pastor. A lot of people kind of have that epiphany early on. For me, it was my mid-20s. I got radically saved at that point in my life, and was volunteering at my church for about 7 years. Got ordained through my church, and then started taking on paid positions in the ministry. And so I was in ministry all total about 19 years. Before I left ministry and pursued launching my own business as a leadership trainer, developer, and coach and speaker, of course. And so that's it was one of these things where being a pastor and doing it for as long as I did, I definitely learned leadership training, team building, developing others, equipping the saints for the work of ministry, as it were, kind of doing that whole people development phase. And I took a coaching course probably in 2015, and that really helped me develop my skills as a pastor, doing one-on-one discipleship and some things along those lines. And then in 2017, I was just doing some personal growth and development for myself, joined the John Maxwell team. And then in 2018, I was just kind of playing around with it. I'd had a transition in 2017 where I wasn't, speaking from a platform as much. I was, I'd kind of taken this role of more of an administrative pastor, where I was doing a lot of, just organizing and orchestrating, event planning, things along those lines that just really didn't speak to my heart of what it was that I got involved in ministry to do, which was to preach the gospel, to speak and to encourage, and doing discipleship and internship programs, and helping really develop and train up the next generation leader. And so over the course of that 2018, just kind of realized that, man, I wasn't quite fitting there anymore. Like, my passions weren't really being met. I didn't feel like I was able to give my best. And so at the end of 2018, met with my leadership and had a discussion and decided that, me pursuing this business, this opportunity was going to be great. It was going to be an opportunity for me. My wife and I fasted and prayed and felt like this was something that we needed to do. And so in July of 2019, I went full time with my business. The church supported me as best as they could, so I jumped out, both feet, jumped and decided to build my wings on the way down. And it was not an easy road at all. And then, of course, the end of 2018, right? Most companies aren't thinking about business growth and development, leadership training and development. They're focused on the holidays and then the first quarter. And so my business took a really big hit. At the same time, at the end of 2019, we found out that my father-in-law was dealing with his fourth round of lymphatic cancer. And for the first time in 20 years, we weren't locked to a church. And so we just fasted, prayed, and felt like, we were to move, and that Waco was where we needed to be. And so that's what we did. We ended up moving to Waco in the middle of the pandemic in June of 2020. And I just started all over from ground zero in a community where I didn't know anybody. And I've been building my business for the last 2.5 years here in Waco. I still service the Permian Basin where I came from, the community that I came from. I've got some clients there, and just doing this thing called life. And so it's had its ups and its downs, but through it all, God's been really faithful. And I just keep trusting him and keep moving forward the best way that I feel like I know how.
I want to take a pause for a moment, because you said something that at the very first needs to be explored a little bit more. You said I was radically saved.
Oh, okay.
Now, being saved myself, I know that radically saved means there was some radical behavior prior to that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I grew up in a small town in West Texas called Big Spring, Texas. And, in the South, we're the Bible Belt, of course. And in Texas, Texas has more mega churches per capita than any other state. And so, yeah, I grew up with a knowledge of faith and a knowledge of, um, what that meant and what that looked like. But it wasn't like I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't real. It was just kind of like a cosmetic feature. In missiology, we talk about it as being a cultural Christian, right?
Mhm.
And that's really what I was. I was a cultural Christian, and so my wife and I had gotten involved in a Bible study called Cleansing Stream, and it was a pretty lengthy Bible study. It was we met for one hour a week, maybe an hour and a half a week, every Sunday night, and did watched a video and did a Bible study, small group kind of base, um, and we did that for 4 months, and then we had a weekend retreat, and then there was another 4 weeks of follow up. So all in all, it was like this 16-week Bible study, and and man, when I went to the retreat, it was just a radical. It was a radical transformation for me. I got set free from a lot of things. I spent a lot of time drinking and partying when I was younger and sleeping around, and experimented with marijuana use, smoking cigarettes, and just all the things that a good old boy does. Um, but I mean, there was no real authentic relationship with Jesus. But after that retreat, everything became different. I would, when I part of what we had to do for our homework for that Bible study was actually reading my Bible, which I'd never done before. And it was really just a powerful stage of my life. And man, I got transformed, literally, just like you see in Scripture. 1 Corinthians 5:17-21, that the old was gone, the new had come, and I was a new creation in Christ. And about 6 months later, I started volunteering in the youth ministry at my church. A month later, I was kind of in charge of it, and then that started the progress of me laying down my life and doing everything I could to build the kingdom of God. And so,
Was there a was there like was there an epiphany, an aha moment where you just said, I need to be a pastor, or was it a slow progression into the pulpit?
um, depending on your spiritual background, right? There's kind of people that would say that you kind of have these moments, and so I felt like early on in my life at different parts, that God was going to use me in some kind of way. Didn't really know because I wasn't really close with God. But after coming back from that retreat, I knew there were, like, I literally felt so cleansed. Um, and I felt so new that I just felt like I could not preach. Um, you know, I wouldn't say that I, I don't know that I was like, okay, I'm going to go out today and become a pastor, but there was definitely moments where I felt like, yeah, I needed to go and be involved in doing certain things. But I mean, within a matter of a few months, it was like, yeah, I really think pastoring is something that I'm called to do.
So how did that dynamic change with your friends? Because partying, drinking, smoking, I'm going to be a pastor.
Yeah,
Those usually don't retain a lot of friends or
yeah,
that same circle. How'd that
yeah.
happen for you?
Well, I mean, it was definitely different. I went from being in the bar about 4 nights out of the week to being in the church about 4 nights out of the week. Um, Most of my friends, I mean, we all grew up in the small town, and so it wasn't like this, oh, you're too holy for us now. It was like, oh, cool. I even had one friend said, yeah, Ken, you needed Jesus. um But most of the relationships stayed. Over time, that you drift apart just because your circles are different, your different stages of life. We were all married and we had our own kids, and so you know we weren't always hanging out together like we were when we were younger. um, but yeah, not a whole lot changed for the most part, um, that I can remember off the top of my head. I mean, there were a couple of people that you just don't hang around with anymore.
Mhm.
But I would still go to our friends for Fourth of July. We were at that stage of life where we were married and had young children, and so we were all kind of together. But there were definitely some people that were, hey, I'm okay with your spirituality, but don't ask me to go to your church because the church is full of hypocrites,
Right.
kind of stuff. But over the course of the years, I definitely got to see more and more of my friends kind of come to me and ask me about faith and what it was like, and do some different Bible studies and some things like that. Um, but yeah, I mean, for the most part, I just got really, really involved in my church and got very, very evangelical in the way I spoke to people and talked about God, and people saw how He changed me, and it was a powerful, powerful time.
So a lot of people have the misconception that once you're saved and once you have Christ in your life, and especially once you're a pastor, that life suddenly is easy and rosy. Not the case, right?
No, no. I had a pastor describe it one time. He said, if we're all running hurdles and then all of a sudden something changes and one guy didn't have the hurdles to run before, eventually everybody would want to do what they did. And I think the difference between a believer and a non-believer is that we all face hurdles. It's just that a believer in Christ has the opportunity to have Christ with them through their hurdles. I wish I could say that everything in my life transformed and turned around, and there were definitely some golden years where everything was good and we were managed to get out of debt, and things were working in our favor. But at the same time, we were you know newly saved about a year and a half in, and got pregnant with our second child, and she was diagnosed in utero with Down syndrome. And so there's that whole, well, wait, if you're following God, how could something like that happen to you? And so you navigate your faith in those situations. And then of course there's church splits and those kind of things that you have to navigate. And so yeah, I mean, it's just because you're a Christian doesn't mean that everything's butterflies and daisies, riding through fields on unicorns, eating rainbow cookies.
Yeah. You just have a better way to get through it for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
Recently you suffered a car accident.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not just the typical fender bender, like everything in Texas, you decided to do it big.
Yeah.
Tell us a little about your accident.
Well, so I MC trivia at a local brewery here in Waco. Some friends of mine own a brewery, and of course, MCing is what I do. I mean, it's part of my business. I've run events for 20 years in ministry, and so it's very easy for me just to entertain the crowd and keep everybody going. And on this particular Wednesday night in July, I had a presentation that I was doing the next day. I was doing a lunch and learn as part of my business platform, just to kind of get out there and introduce people to what I did. And I've been working on it all day. I was really, really tired. Usually, I know that it's going to be a late night, and I'll take a nap. Well, I didn't take a nap. And so we go. And so my daughter is 21 now, the one with Down syndrome. So she loves to go, she loves to hang out, she loves to talk and visit. So trivia came and went, and I was sitting outside working on my presentation, and friends were stopping by and talking. And so we ended up staying until it closed, and then hung out there talking some more. There was quite a few of us hanging out that night. And finally, like 11:30, 11:45, I had to drag my daughter. I was like, look, we've got to go. It's way late. I'm tired. I've got a presentation tomorrow. And so we left. And My wife is a hospice nurse, and she was on call that night. And so she had gone out on a death call. She had to go travel to somebody's house to declare them dead so that the morgue could come and pick them up. And we're going through this little back roads to our house, and there's a small community, and it's almost midnight. It is literally dead. There is no cars coming or going, and there's a four-way stop, right? A red light. And so I pulled up, and it's red. And so I grabbed my phone to text her, "Hey, honey, we're on our way home, just to let you know." And as I pick up my phone to text, it turns green. So I just put my foot on the accelerator like I've done a million times. And I'm texting. And just as I'm finishing up and I put my phone down, bam, I was like, oh my gosh. And I yanked my steering wheel. What it done is I'd hit the end of a curb, kind of the flat part. So it wasn't kind of like this bump like you go over a curb. It was like a hard hit, and it freaked me out. And I jerked the steering wheel. And when I did, I yanked it so hard, we made a 90-degree turn right into a traffic light. The 35 mile or 25 mile an hour is blinking school zone thing. I wasn't speeding, but the way I hit was I hit right at my headlight, just to the left of the I-beam in my frame of my truck. And so everything from the headlight back just started to crumble in on me. Glass shattered, everything kind of happened. Literally the firewall. I mean, I was just squished in there. My daughter called 911. They came out. They opened her door. They had to kind of pop it open, pulled her out. She just had a little few glass scratches, and a few days later, she developed a seatbelt bruise. They checked her out, put her in an ambulance, and took her to the ER. She ended up waiting 4 hours to be seen. For me, it was about 20 to 25 minutes of the jaws of life extricating me from my car. I downplayed this a lot on social media. I didn't want people to freak out or anything. I didn't let my wife post any pictures of the vehicle, but it was really, really bad. I was wearing lace up kind of hiking style boots. They were solid leather, and my left foot was hung up underneath the dash, and they were yanking and yanking and yanking. And finally, my blood pressure dropped so much because of bleeding that they were like, "Mr. Noble, we're just going to have to pull you out. It's going to hurt." And I was like, "It's okay. Do what you got to do, guys." I was talking with them and everything. And so they gave it a go heave ho. And then they got me in the ambulance, and man, I can't explain to you how fast they declothe you. In the movies, when somebody's in the ambulance and they're cutting off clothes, there is no like nipping. It's like when you get a gift wrap, the gift wrapping paper gets just right in the scissors and it slides. Yeah. Like they started at both bottoms of my pants and just right on up. And I was naked. And anyways, they got me to the ER. And what had happened is when they pulled me out, my boot actually stayed in the car. But when they pulled me out, they had ripped my heel off of my heel bone. Mm. And so it was kind of like I had this flip-flop. Sorry for all of those of you that are squeamish. But they ended up putting stitches in my heel. I had stitches in my elbow, stitches on my shin. They x-rayed my foot. They x-rayed my knee, x-rayed my hip, did all the internal workup, all the things. And I'm just telling my wife, "Honey, I'm sure I just have a broken leg. I'll be out tomorrow," trying not to let her worry. That was not the case. They ended up admitting me. I was there for 12 days. The next day, found out that I had a broken femur. That was a late diagnosis. They ended up doing surgery that afternoon. And what was supposed to be like a 2-hour surgery ended up being about 4 hours, because when they put the rod in my femur, right, they cut open your knee and, drill a hole and hammer this rod up your leg, right, and put 2 screws in the bottom, 2 screws in the top. Well, evidently I kind of had a fracture in my hip bone anyways. Well, that really fractured it. So they put 2 pins in my hip, had the podiatrist come in, clean out my foot, and put stitches in there. So I ended up spending 12 days in the hospital. And part of the reason why is because the hospital was wanting me to have rehab, learning how to get around and do all the things and kind of get used to being on a walker and in a wheelchair. And insurance was like, no, he's 48, he's fine. And they're like, no, you don't understand. He's 6'4", 318 pounds or whatever I was. If he falls down, there's not going to be anybody at his house to help him get up. And so it was in that moment and a lot of things that had led up to it where I'd realized I'd let myself kind of slide with self-care and hadn't been taking care of myself as the way I should. And so since that time, I've lost 45 pounds. I'm on my way to lose 40 more by the end of this year. Definitely have started curbing a lot of my eating habits and consumption issues with everything from cigars to alcohol and everything in between. Definitely I've been diagnosed with clinical depression since 2010, had some major depressive disorder at one point. So a lot of this was just kind of like, okay, you know what? This is the stage of my life. I'm 48. I need to take care of myself if I'm going to be here in the long run. And so that's kind of led on a journey since the accident of really doing some of those kind of things and learning how to say no, especially when your body's healing. It's you can't push it, as much as you think you can or should.
Yeah, and for guys like you and Ian, and my audience knows, I've had 3 fusion surgeries in the last 2 years,
Yeah.
and the hardest part of recovery was doing nothing. It's like,
Yes.
you've taken away all of my ability to do anything other than think and read. So,
Yeah.
and when you're used to being up and about and going and doing,
Yeah.
that's
Oh,
horrible.
yeah. I was, I'm building my business. So I was doing anywhere from, I think I was doing 3 networking business meetings a week, plus the lunches and the one-on-ones and the face-to-faces and then the business after hours. I mean, I was going all the time, and all of a sudden that came to a screeching halt. And then I got in trouble because whenever they sent me home, I was trying to get back to it. And my orthopedic trauma doctor was like, no, you have to sit at home with your leg propped up and don't do anything. And that was rough for a while.
Well, especially if you've already been diagnosed with clinical depression, that has to just eat into it.
Well, the crazy thing is that after my accident, all the kind of the effects and the issues of depression seem to have melted away. I mean, I definitely had a major depressive disorder issue in end of 2019, beginning of 2020, with us moving and all of that, and that was really tough. But I've been climbing out and been working my way through and processing all of that. But I definitely felt kind of a little bit of more of a downward slide coming. But after the accident, it was almost like it didn't exist. And part of that, I think, had to do with the anesthesia that they gave me. I'd been doing some research into ketamine infusions and some things along those lines for depression. And I couldn't figure out why I just felt so different after my surgery, and after being this car accident. And one, I'm sure part of it had to do with the near-death experience. But the other part, I think, had to do with the fact that I was infused with ketamine during my surgeries. And I think that kind of helped to restart my brain, so to speak. So
interesting.
Yeah.
And now you just had another surgery related to your.
Yes, on Monday I had knee surgery. So I was in a wheelchair for 15 weeks, non-weight bearing, using the walker to get around, going to the bathroom, getting around my bedroom. And then I got to go full weight bearing right before Thanksgiving, probably the first part of November. And it was just really, really hard bearing weight on that leg. My knee hurt and it kept getting worse and worse. Finally got it in early to see my orthopedic trauma doctor. She scheduled an MRI for the end of December. Got the results back, had a discussion the first week of January, and they rescheduled me to see a sports orthopedic surgeon so he could kind of give his opinion and maybe do surgery. And it looked like I had a torn meniscus. So met with him last week. Literally, it was a week ago on Monday. no, a week ago on Tuesday, and he was like, gave me his opinions. Basically, felt like there was some scar tissue from my femur repair surgery that was in my knee, and then the torn meniscus. And so when they went in and they cleaned all that out, fixed the meniscus, found some arthritis that they cleaned up, and yeah, I got to come home, that afternoon, and been been at home sitting here trying to recover and try not to do too much since then. But that hasn't been the easiest. I had some client training that I had to go do yesterday for a few hours, and then ended up coming home and kind of relaxing for a little bit before I took off and did a few other things. And
so other than don't text and drive, even if
yeah.
you're at a stoplight, what's a one major transformation that this caused for you, other than, like you mentioned, your health getting better and
Yeah.
all that? What's an epiphany that came out of this for you?
There've been quite a few. One of the things for me that has always been the hardest was to ask for help from others. And with this accident, I didn't have a choice. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't make my own meals. I couldn't take showers by myself. I mean, like I just needed help getting in and out. And of course my wife is a nurse. And so she had to, dress my wound every other night. She was in there, scrubbing it and cleaning it and doing all the things. And the whole physical therapy aspect. And I mean, I was having to rely on everyone around me. And that was humbling for me. You know, it's humbling, but yet at the same time, for me, one of my love languages is acts of service. And so I love it when people do things for me unexpected. But having to ask for that, that was really, really hard. And of course, being the man of the family, feeling like you're supposed to be the producer and, the breadwinner and all of that. Definitely was very humbling that I wasn't able to go and generate as much income as I had been before the accident. And, of course, just with the natural progression of my industry coaching, you have coaching clients that phase in and phase out. And I'd lost several coaching clients, and we kind of taken a few hits along the way, financially. And so, yeah, it was real difficult. And so you just got to trust the process. That, for one, it was humbling, realizing how much you needed other people to do for you. The second was understanding that it's not an overnight fix, that it's trusting the process, and how everything in life is really about trusting the process, from building my business and all of those things, right? As business entrepreneurs and leaders, we want the overnight success. We want to work hard and see the results. Right. Well, in this world, right, we work hard and we might not see the results for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, 6 months. And so that can be, that's one of those things where just remembering, trust the process. The things that I do today are going to bear fruit later on down the road, and just applying that to what it is that I'm doing in my business as well, not just in my physical therapy and my recovery.
So how would you take your current experience, because you have all your past experiences to build on that got you to where you are, but your current experience is life altering, because it wasn't just you, it was you and your daughter in that car.
Yeah.
Right? And then it changed the dynamic of your whole family based on the things you just said.
Yeah.
So how would you take that, and how is it propelling you forward?
That's a good question. I have definitely noticed that I am a lot more cautious in just my everyday driving. I've been released to drive again. I've gotten another car. But even yesterday we were driving to go see my in-laws, and it was raining real bad. And I was just very cautious in my driving. I definitely don't text and drive or mess with my phone. One of my first purchases when I got out of the hospital was some AirPods, so I could just talk to my phone and have it do what I needed it to do. And so for me, I think there is this greater understanding of it can happen to you. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times we do things that we know are bad, like texting and driving or whatever it is, because, oh,
Mhm.
that'll never happen to me, right? We
Mhm.
don't say it out loud, but we keep doing it because that's kind of how we feel. And so I don't know, it's just giving me a greater awareness of this could happen to me, and so it's been an interesting even just driving home. So I started emceeing trivia again a few months back, and that first night of being able to drive myself there and drive myself home and driving by the accident site, there was just this little twinge of like, oh, it was just this weird, I don't know. Somebody said it's like a PTSD. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how I would describe it, but definitely there was just this, that's where you almost died kind of thought
Mhm.
that goes by. And um yeah, I mean, it's I don't know that I've got this greater zeal and love for life more than what I already had, but I'm definitely more aware of the moments, the um yeah, just that it could happen to me. Anything could happen to me, and so I've definitely gotten more regular with my doctor visits. After there were some things that came up in my notes whenever I was going in for surgery, so I followed up with my doctor, and then I've set up every 3-month visits with him. I was already seeing a psychiatrist, but I've been more consistent with that. Started to reach out to my psychologist to maybe address possible adult ADHD symptoms that I've had for a long time, that I've just, oh, well, it's just ADHD, haha.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, if that's a thing, then let's go see if it's a thing and get it. I think I'm being more intentional about making sure I'm in the best shape that I can be.
Yeah.
That's probably, you know, and for me, the Lord's been dealing with me for a long time about my health and a lot of other issues. And in the Old Testament, Jacob wrestled with God and got a limp. And honestly, I feel like this was, God finally getting tired of wrestling with me and giving me a limp to slow me down and say, hey, I've been trying to talk to you and get you to deal with a lot of these things for a long time, and you haven't. And now I just don't have a choice. I need to deal with it. And so that's where I'm at. I'm dealing with it. And I talk to people that'll listen. And then of course I work it into, my training and my development stuff, because the process of healing from a car accident is very similar to the process of anything that you do, whether it's leadership training and development, personal growth and development, business building. And so getting the opportunity to intertwine part of my story along those lines into what I'm doing and teaching and telling others has been useful as well.
Well, I think it's vital to live life with intentionality. Oftentimes we are just basically walking through life, one day's leading into the next, bleeding into the other. And unless we really set our intentionality of how we want to live life, 5, 10, 15 years go by and you look back and you're like, holy crap, like, what did I do or what didn't I do is even worse, right?
Yeah.
So living that life with intentionality, I think is a key element. If you were to impart some of your wisdom, like, I love how God wrestled with you and transformed you, and then you became a pastor.
Yeah.
You wrestled with you a little bit and you transformed into a business person, still wanted to get your attention, cause this. So now you're
Yeah.
transforming into a more of a humanitarian
Yeah.
with intentionality.
Yeah.
For those who didn't have a transformational message to get to Christ, who aren't into business and didn't have a car accident that made them examine things,
Yeah.
what would you tell them to help them get out of their mess and help it make their message?
Oh man. I think that's a loaded question. One of my favorite quotes, and the first person I ever heard it was Dave Ramsey. He says that until the pain of change is less than the pain of same, nothing happens.
Mhm.
And, I think for me, um, that's always been the case from one transition to the other. Like my marriage, the pain in my marriage and just the misery that was there led us to a Bible study, and consistency in church that we didn't have before, which led to this transformation. And then even going from the church we were at to another church to a third church, there was always that the pain of change was less than the pain of same. And moving from the church back into the business world, because I was in corporate America before I went into the church world, it was the pain of same, was just to the point where changing and stepping away from the church was to the point where that was better. And then moving from Midland, Texas to Waco, Texas, and then moving, and then restarting my business, and then going through this accident and making the changes that I've changed, right? It always boils down to, I'm not going to change humanity. No matter who you are as a human, you're not going to change until you get tired of the BS, the belief system that you're dealing with, right? And you begin to say, okay, I've got to do something different. And it drives you to do something different, and you can stoke that fire by looking around and asking yourself, are you happy? Are you okay where you are? Or do you want to see something different and change or not? And for me, having to buy, special sized wheelchair and special sized walker and special sized crutches because I was such a big man, and all of these issues, it was like, I can't help how tall I am, but I can help how wide I am, and
Right.
so like there's so many different areas of my life that ultimately it's when you get tired of where you are, then you begin to figure out how to move to the next level or the next situation that makes life better.
I love that. One last question that I ask all my guests before we end. What does a warrior spirit mean to Ken Noble?
Oh my goodness. A warrior spirit. So for me, there's a difference between being a fighter and being a warrior. A fighter is somebody that just kind of gets enlisted into the fight, but a warrior is somebody who has fought numerous times and has wisdom in the ways of warfare. They're not just somebody that's showing up for a fight and they don't know what they're doing. One of my mentors used to say, God rarely chooses his champions from the ranks of the unscarred. And so to me, I think a warrior is someone that has battle scars, has wounds, has traces of victories that they've won and lost, but does not allow that to keep them from continuing to fight. So that would be how I would describe it.
And that embodies exactly why I labeled this podcast a warrior spirit, because it's not about the fights on the battlefield. It's about the winnings on and off and the losings on and off,
Yeah.
And still willing to show up, not only for yourself, but for others.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure.
Well, Ken, I appreciate your time today. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and I look forward to, your healing and seeing what your next journey is.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All righty. Have a blessed day.
Thanks. You too. Bye.
Bye.